On a frozen dock by Lake Michigan, a former Navy SEAL made one choice that criminals never expected. He did not run. He did not threaten. He stood still. Beside him, a German shepherd did not bark, did not chase, only watched. That silence was enough to expose a lie, protect the witness, and pull a violent crew into the open. What followed was not revenge, but consequence. Not chaos, but justice catching up at dawn. If you believe real justice does not shout but endures, if you believe redemption comes from choosing what is right when no one is watching, share this story, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more true stories of courage, faith, and moral reckoning. Footprints on the ice winter locked Milwaukee in a hard, unyielding grip. The harbor of Lake Michigan lay frozen and black, wind cutting like broken glass through steel and bone. Jack Mercer moved along the edge of the pier with the careful balance of a man who had learned to respect pain without surrendering to it. He was just past 40, tall, broad through the shoulders, built not by gyms, but by years of hauling weight under stress. His left leg carried a faint stiffness, a reminder of shrapnel pulled from his knee long after the mission had already ended. He never limped outright. He adjusted. That was who he was. He wore the same clothes every winter night. A navy blue winter coat thick enough to stop lake wind. Beneath it, a red and black flannel shirt, faded jeans, brown work boots scarred at the toes. His dark hair was cut short and uneven, silver threading through it in places he pretended not to notice. Stubble lined his jaw, not styled, just permanent, the kind that came from a man who forgot razors existed when he was busy staying alive. Jack Mercer had once been a Navy SEAL. He never said it aloud. Men who talked about that past were usually still trying to outrun it. Beside him walked Ranger. The German shepherd was 5 years old, black and tan, powerful without bulk. His back was straight, his gait smooth, his head carried high even when the ground was slick with ice. His ears stood tall, alert triangles that never seemed to rest. His eyes were amber brown, sharp and measuring, the kind that made strangers hesitate without knowing why. Ranger wore a black working harness with white block letters stitched clean and clear. Service dog, do not pet. Most people obeyed the warning without understanding it. The few who didn't usually learned quickly. Ranger had been trained once by law enforcement, then retrained by Jack in quieter, harsher ways. He did not bark unless there was reason. He did not pull unless something was wrong. He did not offer affection freely. Loyalty to him was not a gift. It was a decision. Jack trusted the dog more than he trusted silence. They walked the harbor every night, same path, same pace, same absence of conversation. The frozen water stretched out beside them like a held breath. Cranes stood motionless against the sky. Old warehouse lights buzzed faintly, yellow halos swallowed by falling snow. For Jack, routine was not comfort. Routine was control. The world made sense when he told it where to stand. Ranger stopped, not a pause. A halt. The dog's body stiffened, muscles locking beneath his thick winter coat. His head snapped toward the water, his nose lifted. One paw edged forward, claws biting lightly into the ice. Jack felt it immediately, the way men who had survived ambush always did. That shift in the air, that sense of something stepping out of place. "What is it?" Jack murmured, more habit than question. Ranger did not look at him. The dog stared into the darkness where ice met open water near a break in the harbor edge. Snow drifted down thickly, muffling sound. The lake moved slowly beneath the surface, black and heavy. Then Jack saw it. A shape. Wrong. Out of rhythm with the water. A slab of wood bumped gently against the ice, half submerged, scarred and splintered. And on it, tangled awkwardly, was a human body. Jack's breath caught once, just once. He moved closer, boots scraping softly. The beam of a docklight cut through the snow, revealing a woman clinging weakly to the broken plank. An orange life jacket hung crooked on her shoulders, torn along one side. Her dark hair was plastered against her face, wet and stiff with ice. Her skin was pale beneath raw patches of red where wind and water had burned her. She looked to be in her mid-30s, slender, athletic, even now, though exhaustion had hollowed her posture. One arm dangled uselessly into the water, fingers blue and numb. Her lips were cracked, her eyes were closed, unconscious, or worse. Ranger let out a low sound, not a bark, a warning hum deep in his chest. His stance shifted subtly, placing himself between Jack and the darkness beyond the water, as if something else might rise with her. Jack scanned the harbor automatically. No boats, no voices, no movement beyond the slow fall of snow. This was not an accident. Men like Jack learned to recognize patterns, and this scene broke too many of them. The plank was burned along one edge. The life jacket straps were torn, not ripped clean, but yanked hard. Someone had fought here. Someone had lost. Jack crouched, pain flaring briefly in his knee. He ignored it. "Stay," he told Ranger. The dog did not move, but his eyes tracked everything. Jack stepped onto the ice, careful and deliberate. He reached the woman, gripping the plank, hauling her weight inch by inch until her body slid free of the water. She was lighter than she looked, all strength drained out of her. Her breath came shallow but steady. Alive. Jack exhaled slowly. As he lifted her, he noticed a bruise darkening her right temple, already swelling beneath wet hair. A thin cut traced her brow. Her hands were scraped raw, knuckles split. She had fought to stay alive. Jack carried her toward the pier, boots slipping once before Ranger shifted, pressing his body into Jack's leg to brace him. They moved together without words. Behind them, the harbor remained silent. But somewhere in that silence, Jack felt it again. The same pressure he had felt years ago, moments before gunfire, the sense that eyes were watching, that violence had not finished speaking. Ranger glanced back once, ears rigid, gaze fixed on the darkness where the woman had drifted from. Not fear, focus. Jack understood then what anyone foolish enough to hunt them would soon learn. A Navy SEAL who wanted to be left alone was dangerous. A Navy SEAL who chose to act was something else entirely. And the dog at his side was not just a companion, he was a promise. The drifter and the warning, Jack pulled the woman farther from the ice, dragging the plank until it scraped against concrete. Snow settled on her jacket, melting slowly against the heat of her body. She shuddered, teeth chattering, breath shallow and uneven. Ranger stood close, angled toward the dark harbor, his body forming a quiet barrier. He did not touch her. He watched everything else. The woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharp with sudden awareness. Her eyes were a muted blue-gray, the kind that reflected light rather than welcomed it. She was tall for a woman, maybe 5'8", lean in a way that spoke of training rather than fragility. Even half-frozen and soaked, her posture carried discipline. Her dark brown hair hung heavy around her face, tangled and stiff with ice. Her skin was pale beneath windburn and bruising, lips cracked from cold and dehydration. She inhaled sharply, panic flashing across her features, then clamped it down with visible effort. "Don't call anyone," she said hoarsely. Her voice was low, steady despite the tremor underneath. Commanding, not a plea, an order. Jack paused mid-motion, one gloved hand tightening on her torn life jacket strap. "They have people nearby," she continued, blinking hard as if fighting darkness. "Phones, radios, they listen." Jack studied her face for a heartbeat longer than politeness allowed. He had learned long ago how to read truth in seconds. Her eyes were not wild. They were calculating. "All right," he said simply. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't argue. He glanced at Ranger. The dog shifted his stance, lowering his head slightly, weight balanced over his front paws. His ears stayed forward. No sound left his throat. Work mode. Jack shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, ignoring the sting of cold biting through his flannel. He lifted her with controlled effort, adjusting to protect his knee, and carried her toward the maintenance shed near the pier. It was old, half-abandoned, used mostly for storing tools no one trusted anymore. He had keys. People like Jack always did. Inside, the shed smelled of rust, oil, and old lake water. Jack set her down on a wooden bench and grabbed a wool blanket from a locker. He wrapped it around her with quick, efficient movements. "What's your name?" he asked. She swallowed. Her throat worked, as if forcing the word through ice. "Emily Carter." Jack nodded once. "Federal," she added, watching his face carefully. He gave no visible reaction. Emily exhaled slowly, eyes closing for a second. When they opened again, they were clearer, sharper. She took in the room, the tools, the exit, Ranger's position near the door. Her gaze lingered on the dog. "He's trained," she said. "Yes." Her lips twitched faintly. Not a smile? Recognition? Emily Carter worked for a joint federal task force. Though she did not say which one, she did not need to. The way she held herself told Jack enough. She had the look of someone used to walking into rooms where men underestimated her and paid for it later. She was in her mid-30s, strong shoulders beneath the blanket, hands roughened by more than paperwork. A faint scar ran along her left knuckle, old and clean. "They were waiting," she said quietly. Jack crouched in front of her, keeping his voice low. "Who?" "A crew that pretends to be small time," Emily replied. "Dock muscle, winter thieves. They hit freight when the weather keeps witnesses inside." Her jaw tightened. "But this time, they were hired." Ranger's nails clicked softly against the concrete as he shifted his weight. His eyes never left the door. "They wanted evidence," Emily continued. "Something we recovered last week. Proof tying them to murders, not just stolen cargo." Jack felt something cold settle behind his ribs. "Murder changes things," he said. Emily nodded. "They don't leave witnesses." She closed her eyes briefly, breath hitching. When she spoke again, her voice was flatter. "They boarded our boat at night. No noise, no panic, just speed and intent." She touched her temple unconsciously, fingers brushing the bruise. "I fought. Not well enough." Jack listened without interrupting. Silence was a tool. He used it carefully. "They threw me into the water when things went wrong," Emily said. "Thought the cold would finish it." She glanced at Ranger. "Your dog didn't think so?" Ranger flicked an ear but did not look at her. Jack rose and moved to the shed door, cracking it open just enough to scan the pier. Snow continued to fall, thick and steady. No footsteps, no engines, but the night felt attentive. "You said they have people nearby," Jack said. "Yes," Emily replied. "Spotters, runners. They don't rush, they watch." Jack closed the door again. "I live close," he said. "Safer than staying here." Emily hesitated. "Anywhere they don't expect," she said. Jack almost smiled. As they prepared to move, Ranger suddenly stiffened. His head turned sharply toward the harbor entrance. A vehicle engine coughed in the distance, then went quiet. Emily saw the change in the dog before she heard anything. "They're close," she whispered. Jack's voice dropped. "Then we don't walk like prey." Ranger stepped forward, placing himself between Emily and the door. His presence slid, deliberate. He did not bare his teeth. He didn't need to. Anyone foolish enough to push into this space would feel it before understanding it. Jack Mercer checked the weight of his boots, the balance of his body, the familiar calm settling in his chest. He was not looking for a fight, but he was ready to finish one. And somewhere beyond the falling snow, men who thought themselves hunters were about to learn what it meant to step too close to a Navy SEAL and the dog who watched without blinking. The knock of Thug's snow kept falling, thick and steady, muffling the city as Jack led Emily into the old repair shop near the harbor. The building sat back from the pier, brick walls scarred by decades of wind and salt. Inside, the air smelled of oil, cold iron, and a past that refused to be cleaned away. The shop was Jack's refuge, a place where engines were simpler than people. Emily leaned against a workbench, wrapped in the blanket, color slowly returning to her cheeks. Ranger took position near the side door, body angled, eyes never still. He tracked the outside world through sound and scent, cataloging threats the way Jack once cataloged exits. The first sign came quietly. Tires, fresh tread biting into snow where no one parked this late. Ranger's ears flicked, his spine tightened. Jack felt it in his gut before the headlights cut across the frosted windows like blades. A truck idled outside, then another. Engines off, doors opening, footsteps measured, unhurried. Jack moved without panic. He slid a heavy wrench from the bench into a side drawer, then stepped forward, placing himself between Emily and the entrance. His posture changed. Shoulders loosened, breath slowed. The knock came. 3 taps, even, polite. Jack opened the door just enough to see them. 3 men stood under the falling snow, all layered in winter jackets that tried too hard to look ordinary. Their faces told a different story. The one in front was tall and lean, late 30s, sharp cheekbones framed by a trimmed beard that followed his jaw too precisely to be habit. His eyes were pale and restless, the kind that scanned hands before faces. He smiled easily, practiced, as if people usually did what he asked. Behind him stood a heavier man with a shaved head and a thick neck, shoulders hunched forward like a bulldog ready to lunge. A scar cut through his right eyebrow, old and jagged. His hands stayed near his pockets. The third was younger, maybe mid-20s, narrow face, red nose from cold and nerves. His eyes kept drifting past Jack, trying to see inside. "Evening," the first man said warmly. "Sorry to bother you. We're looking for a missing woman." Jack did not return the smile. Ranger stepped forward, just one pace. The dog positioned himself diagonally in front of Jack, broad chest filling the doorway. His head lowered slightly, eyes locked on the lead man's knees, measuring distance. A low sound rolled from his chest, not loud, not threatening in the way movies imagined, but certain. The lead man's smile faltered. "That's quite a dog," he said, holding his hands open. "Friendly?" "No," Jack replied. The word landed flat. Final. The man laughed softly, as if amused. "We won't stay long." Jack looked at him without blinking. "Leave," he said. The heavier man shifted his weight. Snow crunched. The younger one glanced toward the window again. Inside the shop, a figure moved. Sarah stepped into view. She was in her early 30s, tall and narrow-shouldered, with sandy blonde hair pulled into a low, practical knot. Her face was pale from winter and fluorescent light, freckles scattered lightly across her nose. She wore a thick gray sweater dusted with grease, sleeves rolled to her forearms. Her hands were strong, fingers stained with oil. Sarah Lindholm owned the building next door and used half the shop during the day. She was a mechanic by trade, stubborn by nature. Years earlier, a drunk driver had killed her younger brother on an icy road. Since then, Sarah trusted machines more than people and hated men who lied politely. She froze when she saw the visitors. The younger thug's eyes flicked to her, then past her, and finally landed on Emily. Something in his expression sharpened. There it was. Recognition. Jack saw it instantly. The lead man followed the glance. His jaw tightened just enough. "Well," he said lightly, "there she is." Emily stepped forward despite Jack's raised hand. "I don't know you," she said. The man tilted his head. "We know you." Ranger growled again, deeper this time. His muscles bunched beneath his coat, not lunging, not posturing. Ready. Sarah moved closer to Jack, voice low. "You want me to call the cops?" The lead man's smile vanished. "No need for that," he said. "This is a family matter." Jack took one step forward. "You heard me," he said. "Go." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the heavier man's hand slid inside his jacket. Ranger shifted instantly, body lowering, eyes narrowing. Jack's left hand rose palm outward, not toward the men, but toward the dog. Hold. The lead man noticed. He noticed the calm, the lack of noise, the way Jack's weight was balanced, ready. He noticed the harness on Ranger's chest. Service dog. Do not pet. Understanding crept into his eyes. "You don't want trouble," the man said. Jack's voice was quiet. "You're already standing in it." Snow fell between them, thick and indifferent. The lead man backed up one step. Then another. "Let's go," he muttered to the others. The truck doors slammed. Engines roared back to life. Tires spun briefly, then found grip, retreating into the night. Silence returned. Ranger stayed alert until the sound faded completely. Only then did he relax, stepping back to Jack's side. Sarah exhaled shakily. "Those weren't looking for family," she said. "No," Jack replied. Emily nodded. "They won't stop." Jack looked at the door, then down at Ranger. "They don't have to," he said. "We'll finish it." Ranger's tail moved once, slow, certain. Justice and consequence. Jack did not run that night. Running only taught men like those how much fear they owned. Jack had learned that lesson long before he left the teams, back when retreat without purpose cost lives. He chose movement instead. Controlled. Intentional. He took Emily through the snow toward a small brick church tucked between shuttered storefronts and an empty bus stop. The sign out front read, St. Bridget's, paint peeling, lights dark. It had been closed for winter, except to those who still knew where the spare key rested. Father Thomas Hale opened the door without surprise. He was in his late 70s, thin and slightly stooped, with wisps of white hair circling a bald crown. His skin was pale and lined, eyes sharp behind thick glasses. Years earlier, he had served as a Navy chaplain during Vietnam. The war had softened his voice but hardened his spine. He ushered Emily inside without questions, wrapping her in a heavier blanket and guiding her to a pew near the altar. "You're hurt," he said gently. "She's alive," Jack replied. "That matters first." Father Hale nodded and moved toward the rectory office where an old shortwave radio sat on a shelf. It was outdated but reliable, the kind of equipment built when failure was not an option. Jack did not stay. He left Emily under the church roof with Ranger posted at the door, then turned back into the snow alone. The harbor waited, frozen and patient. Justice required facts. The pier looked different at night. Shadows stretched longer, sounds traveled farther. Jack moved carefully, scanning ice and concrete with the trained eye of a man who once hunted signs no one else could see. Ranger returned to his side halfway down the dock, materializing from the darkness without a sound. The dog's nose dropped immediately to the ground. There. Drag marks scored the ice near the waterline, not wide enough for a body bag, not clean enough for cargo. Something heavy had been pulled in a hurry. A faint streak of diluted blood marked the path, frozen mid-flow. Jack crouched despite the ache in his knee. A scrap of fabric lay caught against the bollard, dark blue, industrial grade. The edge bore a partial logo from a regional shipping warehouse. "Good," Jack murmured. "You wanted attention." They didn't have to wait long. Movement flickered at the edge of Jack's vision. 3 figures emerged between stacked containers, spacing themselves instinctively. One of them held a knife low along his thigh, blade catching light in brief flashes. They moved like men who had practiced violence without ever facing consequences. Jack stood slowly. Ranger shifted position, placing himself half a step behind Jack's right leg. His ears were pinned forward. His body was a coiled line of muscle and restraint. The first thug rushed. He was fast but sloppy, confidence born of easy wins. The knife came up in a wide arc meant to intimidate. Ranger did not go for the throat. He launched sideways, all 80 pounds of disciplined force driving into the man's planted leg. The impact shattered balance. Bone cracked. The thug screamed as he hit the ice. Jack was already moving. He caught the knife hand mid-fall, twisted once, and the weapon clattered away. Jack pinned the man face down, knee pressed between shoulder blades, breath calm. "Stay down," Jack said quietly. The others froze. Ranger stood between them and Jack, posture rigid, eyes locked. He did not bare teeth. He did not bark. His stillness promised precision. One man bolted. The other dropped to his knees. Jack secured zip ties from his pocket. He always carried them. Hope was not a plan. The kneeling man shook violently, face pale, eyes darting between Jack and the dog. "Talk," Jack said. It did not take long. They had taken the evidence to an abandoned cold storage warehouse 3 miles inland. A man was being held there, alive, for now. The buyer was coming at dawn. Jack listened without expression. When the man finished, Jack stood and stepped back. Ranger remained close until police sirens cut faintly through the snow. Father Hale had made contact. Federal channels had opened. Jack turned away before the lights arrived. By morning, the warehouse was surrounded. Emily stood wrapped in a coat that was not hers, color back in her face, eyes steady again. The hostage was recovered, the evidence secured. The men were taken away in cuffs, screaming about rights and bad luck. Jack watched from a distance. Emily approached him slowly. "You could have killed them," she said. "Yes, but you didn't." "No." She studied his face, then nodded once. "That's why they'll stay afraid," she said. Ranger pressed against Jack's leg, eyes tracking the departing cruisers. His work was done, for now. Snow kept falling, quiet and clean. Justice had been served without spectacle. And somewhere deep in the city, men who lived by intimidation learned the cost of crossing a Navy SEAL and the dog who never missed what mattered. Dawn over Lake Michigan. The sky began to pale just before dawn, the black of night thinning into a bruised blue over Lake Michigan. Wind skimmed across the frozen surface, lifting powdery snow into brief, whispering spirals. Jack Mercer stood at the edge of the harbor as unmarked federal vehicles rolled toward the cold storage warehouse inland. Their headlights stayed low. Engines idled with disciplined restraint. Men and women stepped out wearing winter gear and expressions sharpened by purpose. Among them was Agent Daniel Reeves, early 40s, tall and angular, with close-cropped black hair and a beard trimmed tight along a scarred jawline. Years ago, a roadside bomb overseas had left him with a permanent hitch in his right shoulder. It had also stripped him of illusions. Reeves spoke little, listened carefully, and moved with the precision of someone who trusted preparation over luck. He nodded once to Jack. "We've got it from here." Jack returned the nod. He did not follow. From a distance, he watched the operation unfold. Doors breached, shouted commands, hands raised, no gunfire, no chaos. The men who had once relied on fear now knelt in snow, wrists bound, faces pressed toward consequences they could not talk their way out of. Ranger stood at Jack's side, head high, eyes tracking movement with quiet interest. His breath steamed faintly in the cold air. The dog looked less like a weapon now and more like a witness, present to ensure the ending stayed honest. Emily Carter emerged from the warehouse wrapped in a thick parka provided by one of the agents. Her posture was steadier than the night before, though exhaustion still traced shadows beneath her eyes. In the gray light, her features softened. The discipline remained, but relief had found room to breathe. She crossed the snow toward Jack, boots crunching softly. "They're alive," she said. "My team. Shaken but alive." Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "They'll talk," Emily added. "They always do." She studied him for a long moment. Snow clung to his coat. The early light caught the silver at his temples. Ranger leaned lightly against Jack's leg, a familiar weight. "You could have disappeared," she said. "Most would have." Jack shrugged. "Disappearing doesn't fix anything." Emily smiled faintly, the expression tentative, honest. "You're what scares them," she said. "Not because you are strong, because you can't be bought." Jack said nothing. Sirens faded into the distance as prisoners were loaded and evidence secured. The city began to wake. Somewhere nearby, a delivery truck rattled over uneven pavement. Life resumed its ordinary rhythm, unaware of how close it had come to something darker. Later, at St. Bridget's, Father Thomas Hale poured coffee from an old thermos into mismatched cups. The church smelled faintly of incense and dust, of wood polished by time and patience. "You didn't go back to war," the priest said quietly, handing Jack a cup. "You brought truth into the light." Jack stared down at the dark surface of the coffee. "I never left it," he replied. "I just stopped pretending it was everywhere." Father Hale smiled, lines deepening around his eyes. Ranger lay at Jack's feet, finally relaxed. His ears twitched now and then, but his eyes closed, trusting the quiet. By mid-morning, Jack walked alone along the harbor path. Snow reflected sunlight in sharp flashes. Ice groaned softly beneath the distant pressure of shifting water. He paused where he had first seen the woman on the plank. The lake looked calm now, innocent. Jack knew better. Water remembered everything it took. Ranger stepped forward, sniffed the air, then looked back at Jack. A question. A choice. "We're done here," Jack said softly. They turned toward home. Behind them, the city carried on, unaware that a line had been drawn and held. Somewhere in Milwaukee, men who once believed themselves untouchable would wake in cells, learning that silence could be more terrifying than violence, because silence meant consequences. And those consequences wore a navy coat, walked with a faint hitch in his step, and was never alone. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or fire from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly, wrapped in winter, carried by a choice someone makes when no one is watching. That night on Lake Michigan, it was not strength that changed the outcome. It was conscience. It was restraint. It was the decision to stand for what is right, even when walking away would have been easier. Many people ask where God is when danger comes close. But perhaps the better question is this: who does God send when someone must choose between fear and courage? In everyday life, we face smaller versions of the same test. A moment to speak up, a chance to protect someone weaker, an opportunity to do the right thing without applause. Faith is not always loud, justice is not always violent, and miracles often look like ordinary people who refuse to be bought, refuse to turn away, and refuse to let darkness decide the ending. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what this story reminded you of. Subscribe to the channel to support stories of faith, courage, and quiet justice. May God watch over you and your family. May He guide your steps through difficult seasons. And may He remind you, even in the coldest moments, that you are never truly alone.